Hello there and welcome. Tonight, we're exploring something that feels both distant and deeply familiar at the same time: space travel. Not the loud, cinematic kind filled with countdowns and urgency, but the slow, quiet kind that happens in your imagination when your mind begins to drift. For all that science has achieved, traveling through space remains one of humanity's greatest uncertainties. We've sent machines farther than any human has ever gone. We've watched planets pass beneath silent probes. And yet, the experience of moving through space, what it would truly feel like, what we would encounter, and what might change us along the way, remains mostly unknown. We often imagine space travel as a destination. But in reality, it's a journey through vast emptiness, gentle motion, and time that behaves differently than it does here on Earth. There are regions where sunlight grows thin, places where direction loses meaning, distances so large that even traveling at incredible speeds, you would still feel unhurried. And that's where tonight's journey begins. As you settle in, imagine yourself already in motion. No engines roaring, no pressure to arrive. Just a steady, peaceful glide through darkness sprinkled with quiet light. Space doesn't rush you. It doesn't ask for understanding. It simply unfolds. There are still many things we don't know about traveling through space. How the mind responds to long silence. How the body adapts to weightlessness over time. What happens when days and nights no longer exist in familiar ways. But these unknowns don't need answers right now. They're not problems to solve. They're invitations to slow down. Tonight isn't about reaching a destination. It's about drifting comfortably, safely, through the calm ideas and gentle questions that surround space travel. Before we begin, if you enjoy peaceful science journeys like this, you're welcome to subscribe and support the channel. Now, get comfortable, maybe plug in your headphones, let your breathing slow, and let's begin drifting through the most relaxing facts about space travel. Imagine leaving Earth without the urgency we usually associate with space travel. No loud countdowns, no sudden bursts of energy, no sharp moment where everything changes at once. Instead, picture the departure as something gradual and almost unnoticeable, like the way evening slowly replaces afternoon. At first, everything still feels familiar. Gravity is still present. The world below looks the same. But little by little, the sense of being firmly held begins to soften, and the idea of motion takes on a quieter meaning. When we think about leaving Earth, we often imagine speed, rockets, flames, force. Yet in reality, once a spacecraft reaches orbit, the feeling is less about rushing forward and more about continuously falling around the planet. That's one of the gentlest facts about space travel. Orbit isn't a violent escape from Earth's pull. It's a kind of balance. The spacecraft is always being pulled downward by gravity, but it's also moving sideways fast enough that it keeps missing the ground. From inside, this doesn't feel dramatic at all. It feels calm. It feels like floating, as if Earth has loosened its grip just enough to allow rest. As the distance slowly increases, Earth doesn't disappear right away. It stays in view for a long time, growing smaller at a pace that feels almost thoughtful. Continents blend into soft patterns. Colors shift from detailed textures to broad strokes of blue, white, and brown. One interesting fact is that astronauts often describe this moment not as exciting, but as strangely peaceful. The planet doesn't rush away. It simply settles into the background, as if giving quiet permission to leave. Another gentle truth about departing Earth is that gravity doesn't vanish suddenly. Even far above the surface, gravity is still there, still guiding motion. The feeling of weightlessness comes not from the absence of gravity, but from sharing the same free fall as the spacecraft itself. Everything inside is falling together at the same rate. This shared motion removes pressure rather than creating it. The body doesn't feel pulled downward anymore. Muscles relax. The sense of heaviness that's always been present, even without notice, slowly fades. As this happens, the body begins to experience space not as a challenge, but as a release. Arms and legs no longer need to support weight. Movements become slow and deliberate. A small push sends you drifting gently across a room. This isn't because space is chaotic. It's because it's predictable in a different way. Motion continues quietly until something stops it. There's no friction in the air. No resistance asking you to hurry or slow down. Everything happens at its own pace. Leaving Earth also means leaving behind the constant cues that structure everyday life. There's no clear up or down. No horizon demanding orientation. This absence can feel unsettling at first, but it quickly becomes soothing. Without a fixed direction, the mind doesn't need to stay alert in the same way. There's less to monitor, less to correct. One of the most calming facts about space travel is that once you're free from gravity's familiar direction, the body adapts by letting go. The sounds change as well. Inside a spacecraft, there's no wind, no weather, no distant noise from the world outside. What remains are soft, steady hums. Systems running quietly in the background. This consistent sound becomes a kind of gentle companion. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists, providing reassurance that everything is functioning as it should. Many astronauts describe this as one of the most comforting aspects of early space travel. Silence, broken only by predictable rhythms. As Earth continues to recede, another subtle shift takes place in how time feels. Without the regular cycle of sunrise and sunset marking the day, hours lose some of their urgency. In low Earth orbit, the sun may rise and set many times in a single day, but these transitions are no longer tied to routine. Time becomes something you notice rather than something that pushes you forward. This change often brings a sense of calm, as if the clock has softened its voice. There's also something grounding about realizing how gentle the initial stages of space travel really are. Despite the scale of the journey, the early moments are defined by stability. Orbits are carefully planned. Paths are predictable. Movements are slow and precise. Space travel, at least at first, is less about exploration and more about settling into a new kind of stillness. The excitement we imagine gives way to something quieter and more reflective. Another interesting fact is that even as Earth grows smaller, it remains emotionally present. Astronauts often report feeling a stronger connection to the planet after leaving it. Seeing Earth as a whole, without borders or divisions, changes perception. The planet doesn't look busy from afar. It looks calm. The clouds move slowly. The oceans reflect light gently. From this distance, Earth feels less like a place of constant activity and more like a single, living system breathing steadily. This perspective shift begins almost immediately after departure. It doesn't require traveling far into deep space. Simply rising above the surface is enough to alter how the mind understands home. The urgency of everyday concerns fades. Problems that once felt heavy begin to lose weight. This is sometimes called the overview effect, and while it's often discussed in dramatic terms, at its core, it's a quiet emotional realignment. A soft reminder that life continues smoothly even when we step away. As the journey continues, the sense of motion becomes more abstract. You are moving incredibly fast, yet it doesn't feel that way. There's no sensation of speed, no rushing wind, no vibration. Movement through space is silent and smooth, a steady glide rather than a push. This is one of the most counterintuitive and calming facts about space travel. The faster you go, the less you feel it. Speed becomes something you understand intellectually, not physically. With fewer physical cues demanding attention, the mind begins to wander gently. Thoughts stretch up. Memories surface without urgency. There's space, both literal and mental, to reflect. This mental spaciousness is one of the most profound aspects of leaving Earth. Without the constant pull of gravity and routine, awareness broadens. It becomes easier to simply observe rather than react. Even the idea of risk, so often associated with space travel, fades into the background during these early moments. Systems are designed to be stable. Procedures are rehearsed until they become second nature. Much of the time is spent waiting, monitoring, and resting. The journey outward is not a continuous sequence of dramatic events. It's a collection of quiet hours stitched together by calm intention. As Earth becomes a distant presence, its gravity still quietly shapes the path of travel. Orbits curve gently. Trajectories are adjusted with small, careful movements. Nothing is rushed. Space travel relies on patience and precision rather than force. This reliance on subtlety is one of its most soothing qualities. Progress happens not through struggle, but through understanding how to move with the natural rhythms already in place. At this stage, leaving Earth feels less like a separation and more like a transition. The planet is still there, still visible, still exerting its influence. But the relationship has changed. Instead of being held tightly, you're now moving alongside it, sharing a broader path around the sun. This shift from attachment to coexistence mirrors a deeper emotional change, one that encourages calm acceptance rather than resistance. As the spacecraft continues its quiet journey, the body and mind settle into this new state. Breathing slows. Movements become efficient and gentle. There's no need to brace against weight or strain. Everything feels supported by motion itself. This sense of being carried rather than pushed is one of the most peaceful aspects of space travel. And so, leaving Earth without urgency becomes less about departure and more about easing into a different way of being. A way defined by balance, patience, and quiet motion. The journey doesn't begin with a dramatic break, but with a soft release. A gradual widening of perspective. A calm acknowledgement that there is no need to hurry, because the path forward unfolds on its own, at a pace that invites rest rather than demands effort. As the journey continues away from Earth, one of the first things that becomes noticeable is not what appears, but what disappears. Sound fades. The familiar background noise of life, wind moving through trees, distant traffic, the hum of a crowded world, no longer follows you. Space does not carry sound the way air does. There is no medium to pass vibrations along, no atmosphere to translate motion into noise. And so, the silence between worlds is not empty or cold. It is deep, steady, and surprisingly comforting. Inside a spacecraft, there are still sounds, of course. Soft airflow, quiet systems working in the background, the gentle click of instruments doing their job. But beyond the walls, there is nothing pressing in. No roar, no echo, no distant rumble. One of the most calming facts about space is that it does not intrude. It doesn't fill the senses. It allows them to rest. This absence of external sound gives the mind a chance to slow down, as if the universe itself has lowered its voice. Silence in space is often misunderstood as something dramatic or unsettling. But for those who experience it, the silence feels more like stability than emptiness. Without constant auditory input, the brain no longer needs to filter or prioritize noise. Attention softens. Thoughts stretch out and become less sharp. This is one reason astronauts often describe space as mentally peaceful, despite the complexity of their work. The quiet allows focus without pressure. Another gentle truth about this silence is that it changes how movement is perceived. On Earth, motion almost always comes with sound. A footstep, a passing vehicle, even a breeze creates noise. In space, movement is silent. A spacecraft can glide at incredible speeds without announcing itself. This separation between motion and sound makes movement feel smoother and more abstract, as if it's happening at a distance from the senses. As you drift farther from Earth, resistance also fades. There is no air to push against, no friction to slow things down. Once an object begins moving, it continues at the same pace until something gently changes its direction. This creates a kind of effortless motion. One of the most soothing facts about space travel is that movement doesn't require constant effort. A small adjustment can carry you a long way. Energy is used sparingly, thoughtfully, rather than continuously. This lack of resistance affects the body in subtle ways. Movements become slower, not because they have to be, but because there is no urgency. There's nothing pushing back, nothing demanding speed or force. A simple push sends you drifting quietly across a room. Stopping requires only a light touch. The body quickly learns that it doesn't need to work as hard. Muscles relax. Tension eases. The silence also changes how distance feels. On Earth, sound helps us judge how far away things are. A voice fading, a sound growing louder, these cues are constant. In space, distance is understood visually and intellectually, not emotionally. Objects don't announce their presence. They simply exist, quietly occupying their place. This makes space feel vast, but not overwhelming. There's room to breathe, room to think. Another calming aspect of silence in space is how it removes the sense of being watched or observed. Without sound, there's no sense of something approaching unexpectedly. Everything unfolds in plain sight, slowly and predictably. This transparency creates a feeling of safety. The environment doesn't surprise you. It doesn't demand reaction. It simply allows awareness. Over time, this quiet begins to influence the rhythm of thought. Without constant sensory input, the mind naturally turns inward. Thoughts become less scattered. There's a noticeable reduction in mental noise. Worries that once felt loud lose their intensity. This isn't because problems are solved, but because they're no longer being amplified by constant stimulation. Space offers a kind of mental stillness that's difficult to find elsewhere. Even the idea of danger feels different in this silence. On Earth, danger often announces itself with sound: sirens, alarms, raised voices. In space, caution exists, but it's handled calmly and deliberately. Systems are monitored quietly. Responses are measured. The absence of external noise encourages a slower, more thoughtful approach to action. This steady pace contributes to an overall sense of calm. As movement continues without resistance, time itself begins to feel less demanding. Without the usual cues that mark progress, no footsteps, no traffic, no background chatter, moments blend together smoothly. Minutes pass without announcing themselves. Hours feel gentle rather than heavy. This softened sense of time allows rest to come more naturally, even while awake. There's also something deeply reassuring about knowing that silence in space is not emptiness, but balance. The vacuum of space is filled with invisible structures, gentle forces, and slow interactions that don't need sound to exist. Gravity still shapes paths. Light still travels. Objects still influence one another across vast distances. Everything functions quietly, without calling attention to itself. This quiet functioning of the universe can feel grounding. It suggests that complexity doesn't always require noise. That important things can happen silently. That movement and change don't need to be loud to be meaningful. These ideas resonate deeply, especially when the mind is ready to rest. As the journey carries on, the silence becomes familiar rather than noticeable. It fades into the background, not because it disappears, but because it no longer stands out. It becomes the new normal. And within this quiet, there's a sense of being held, not by sound, but by predictability and gentle motion. The absence of resistance also means that paths are smooth and uninterrupted. There's no turbulence in the traditional sense. No sudden jolts caused by air or terrain. Motion is continuous and even. This smoothness further reinforces a feeling of safety. The environment feels stable, consistent, and reliable. Over long periods, this combination of silence and effortless motion can feel almost meditative. Breathing aligns naturally with the slow pace of movement. Thoughts settle into a steady rhythm. The mind begins to mirror the environment, quiet, spacious, unhurried. Another interesting fact is that this silence extends even to communication across vast distances. Signals sent through space travel quietly as waves of energy, carrying information without sound. Messages move at incredible speeds, yet they arrive silently. This reinforces the idea that space is a place where connection doesn't require noise. Communication happens calmly, patiently, without disruption. As you continue drifting through this silent environment, the absence of resistance makes every movement feel intentional. Nothing happens by accident. Even the smallest adjustments have purpose. This clarity can be deeply comforting. It removes the sense of chaos and replaces it with quiet order. The silence between worlds is not something to fill. It doesn't ask for music or conversation. It offers itself as a space where rest is possible without effort, where awareness can exist without strain, where motion and stillness blend seamlessly. And so, as the spacecraft continues its gentle path, the quiet remains constant. It doesn't change or fade. It simply accompanies the journey, offering a steady backdrop against which thoughts can slow and attention can soften. Movement continues, unpushed and unresisted, guided by subtle forces that don't need to announce themselves. In this quiet, there is no rush, no demand, only the calm understanding that even in the vast spaces between worlds, stillness is always present, waiting to be noticed. As the journey continues deeper into space, the sensation of floating without weight begins to feel less like something unusual and more like a natural state of being. On Earth, weight is constant and unquestioned. It presses gently on the body every moment of every day. We grow so accustomed to it that we rarely notice how much effort it requires. Standing, sitting, even resting all involve small, continuous adjustments. In space, that constant pressure quietly disappears, and with it goes a layer of effort the body has carried for a lifetime. Weightlessness is often imagined as dramatic or disorienting, but in reality, it's surprisingly gentle. The body doesn't suddenly lose control or orientation. Instead, it slowly learns that it no longer needs to brace itself. Muscles that once worked non-stop to keep balance begin to relax. Joints feel lighter. The spine gently lengthens without the familiar downward pull. One of the most calming facts about floating in space is that nothing is forcing the body into a particular shape. It's free to settle into whatever position feels most comfortable. This sensation of floating is not caused by the absence of gravity, but by sharing the same motion as the spacecraft. Everything inside is falling together in a smooth, continuous path around Earth or beyond it. Because there's no surface pushing back, the body experiences this as weightlessness. The effect is subtle but profound. Instead of being supported by the ground, the body is supported by motion itself. This creates a feeling of being carried rather than held. As this new way of moving becomes familiar, the body begins to conserve energy naturally. Movements slow down. Gestures become smaller and more intentional. There's no need to rush or overcorrect. A gentle push is enough to glide across a space. Stopping requires only the lightest touch. This ease of movement encourages calm. The body learns that effort can be minimal and still effective. Floating also changes how the body relates to space around it. On Earth, movement is mostly horizontal, guided by floors and walls. In weightlessness, movement becomes three-dimensional. Up, down, and sideways lose their usual meaning. The body can rotate slowly, drift gently, or remain still without discomfort. This freedom of orientation can feel liberating. Without the constant reminder of gravity, the mind stops prioritizing direction and balance, allowing attention to soften. Another gentle truth about weightlessness is how it affects breathing. On Earth, breathing subtly works against gravity, especially when lying down or sitting upright. In space, the chest and lungs are free from that downward pressure. Breathing becomes more even and relaxed. Many astronauts report that their breathing feels smoother and more natural in weightlessness. This steady rhythm of breath contributes to an overall sense of calm and ease. The feeling of floating also influences how the body rests. There's no pressure point from a bed or chair. No need to shift positions to relieve weight. The body can rest in a neutral, supported state, suspended gently in place. This can feel deeply relaxing, as if the body is being held evenly from all sides. The absence of pressure allows muscles to release tension that may have gone unnoticed for years. As time passes, the nervous system begins to adapt to this new environment. Without constant signals from gravity, the brain recalibrates how it understands movement and position. This process happens quietly and gradually. The body learns that it's safe to let go, that nothing bad happens when familiar cues are absent. This adaptation itself can feel soothing, reinforcing a sense of trust in the environment. Weightlessness also changes how effort is perceived. On Earth, effort is often linked to strain. In space, effort becomes lighter and more deliberate. Actions are not about overcoming resistance, but about guiding motion. This shift encourages mindfulness. Each movement feels intentional, not forced. This can create a sense of harmony between intention and action, where nothing feels rushed or heavy. Another interesting aspect of floating is how it affects circulation. Without gravity pulling blood downward, fluids in the body redistribute more evenly. While this requires adjustment, it also removes the constant uphill work the heart does on Earth. The cardiovascular system operates differently, but often more gently. This change can contribute to a feeling of internal balance, as if the body's systems are sharing the load more evenly. Floating without weight also affects how the mind perceives the body itself. Without the familiar sensations of pressure and weight, the body can feel less defined. Boundaries soften. The sense of being anchored to a specific point diminishes. This can create a feeling of lightness not just physically, but mentally. Thoughts seem to drift more freely, mirroring the body's gentle motion. As the body floats, it becomes easier to notice subtle sensations. The slow movement of air, the rhythm of breathing, the quiet pulse of the heart. Without the distractions of gravity and constant effort, awareness turns inward naturally. This heightened awareness is not sharp or demanding. It's soft, like listening to a distant, steady sound. Another calming fact about weightlessness is that it encourages rest without forcing it. The body doesn't need to prepare for impact or support. It can remain in a state of readiness without tension. This makes it easier to relax without fully falling asleep or to drift into sleep without resistance. The environment supports both states equally well. Floating also changes the relationship between movement and time. Movements take longer, not because they must, but because there's no need to hurry. A simple turn can last several seconds. A slow drift across a room can feel like a small journey. This extended sense of motion gives the mind time to follow along, reducing the urge to rush ahead. There's a quiet joy in realizing that the body doesn't need to work as hard as it once did. That many of the tensions carried on Earth are responses to gravity rather than necessities. In weightlessness, the body learns a new baseline, one defined by ease rather than effort. This lesson can linger, influencing how the body feels even after returning to gravity. Floating without weight also alters how the body experiences temperature. Without air currents driven by gravity, heat disperses differently. The environment feels more stable, less prone to sudden changes. This consistency adds to the sense of comfort and predictability, reinforcing relaxation. As the experience continues, the body begins to trust the space it occupies. There's no fear of falling, no anticipation of impact. Motion becomes something to enjoy rather than manage. This trust allows deeper relaxation to set in, both physically and mentally. Another gentle truth is that weightlessness highlights how adaptable the human body truly is. Despite evolving under gravity, the body adjusts quickly to its absence. Muscles learn new patterns. Balance systems recalibrate. This adaptability can feel reassuring, reminding us that change doesn't always require struggle. Sometimes, it unfolds naturally when given time. Floating also creates a sense of equality between body and environment. There's no dominant force pushing down. Instead, there's a balance between motion and stillness. The body feels like part of the surrounding space rather than something separate from it. This sense of integration can be deeply calming, fostering a feeling of belonging rather than isolation. As the spacecraft continues its gentle journey, the experience of floating becomes less novel and more familiar. The body settles into this state with ease. Movements become instinctive. Rest comes naturally. The mind follows, letting go of the need to control or predict. In this weightless environment, the body is free to exist without constant adjustment. It can simply be, and in that simplicity, there's a profound sense of ease. Floating without weight is not about defying gravity. It's about discovering what remains when effort is no longer required. A quiet reminder that sometimes letting go is the most restful motion of all. At some point in the journey, distance quietly begins to change how everything feels. Not because anything dramatic happens, but because scale slowly replaces speed as the dominant idea. The farther you move from Earth, the less meaningful velocity becomes. What starts to matter instead is how vast the space around you truly is and how gently it invites the mind to slow down. On Earth, distance is usually measured by how long it takes to get somewhere. Minutes, hours, maybe days. In space, distance is measured differently. It's measured in millions of miles, in light that takes time to travel, in spans so large they don't fit neatly into everyday thinking. One calming fact about space travel is that these distances don't feel urgent. They don't rush you. They simply exist, steady and patient, allowing movement to unfold without pressure. As distance grows, time begins to soften. On Earth, time often feels compressed, shaped by schedules and expectations. In space, long distances stretch time open. A journey that takes days or months becomes less about arrival and more about passage. Each moment has room to breathe. This expanded sense of time can feel deeply relaxing, as if the clock itself has decided to slow down. Another gentle truth is that as distances increase, the idea of importance begins to shift. Things that once felt heavy or immediate start to lose their sharp edges. From far away, Earth becomes a small, luminous point, and the concerns that once filled entire days feel lighter. This isn't because they no longer matter, but because they're seen within a much larger context. Scale has a way of quieting urgency. Distance also changes how we think about motion. Traveling incredibly fast through space doesn't feel fast at all. There's no sensation of rushing air or passing scenery. Instead, movement becomes abstract. You know you're covering enormous distances, but the experience itself remains calm and smooth. This separation between knowledge and sensation allows the mind to relax. Speed becomes a number, not a feeling. As the journey continues, the vastness around you becomes more noticeable than the movement itself. Space doesn't feel empty so much as expansive. There's room in every direction. This openness can feel freeing. Without close boundaries or constant landmarks, the mind stops scanning for obstacles. Awareness widens and thoughts begin to drift more gently. Another interesting fact about distance in space is how it changes our relationship with light. Light travels incredibly fast, yet even at that speed, it takes time to cross vast distances. When you look out into space, you're often seeing things as they were long ago. Stars shine with light that left them years, centuries, or even millennia earlier. This realization can be calming. It reminds us that the universe unfolds on timescales far beyond immediate concern. As distance stretches, the idea of now becomes less rigid. The present moment feels less confined. Past, present, and future seem to blend more softly. This can ease the mind, reducing the sense of urgency that often accompanies everyday life. There's comfort in knowing that change happens slowly on a cosmic scale. Distance also alters how the body perceives effort. Long journeys require patience rather than strength. Small adjustments made gently can have lasting effects over time. Space travel relies on subtle changes and careful planning, not constant exertion. This emphasis on patience over force reinforces a calmer approach to movement and progress. Another soothing aspect of vast distance is how it encourages reflection without demand. There's time to think, but no requirement to reach conclusions. Thoughts can arise and fade without needing resolution. This open-ended mental space mirrors the physical environment, creating harmony between inner and outer experience. As Earth recedes further, it becomes one point among many rather than the center of attention. This shift in perspective can be grounding. It doesn't diminish the importance of home, but it places it within a broader pattern. The universe feels less like a backdrop and more like an active presence, quietly surrounding everything. Distance also highlights the steadiness of motion. Orbits follow predictable paths. Trajectories curve gently. Even over immense spans, movement remains orderly. This reliability can feel reassuring. It suggests that vastness doesn't mean chaos. On the contrary, the larger the scale, the more consistent the patterns often become. Another calming fact is that distance reduces noise, not just physically but mentally. The farther you are from constant stimulation, the easier it becomes to hear your own thoughts without interruption. This quiet mental space can feel restorative, offering relief from the constant input of everyday life. As the journey carries on, the mind begins to appreciate scale for what it is, a reminder that not everything needs immediate attention. Problems don't vanish, but they no longer demand urgency. They become part of a larger landscape, one where patience and perspective are natural responses. Distance also reshapes how we think about progress. On Earth, progress is often measured by speed and efficiency. In space, progress is measured by alignment and timing. Waiting for the right moment can be just as important as moving forward. This balance between action and patience can feel soothing, encouraging a more gentle approach to goals and expectations. The farther you travel, the more the universe reveals its calm continuity. Stars continue to burn steadily. Planets follow their paths. Nothing seems rushed. This steady rhythm can influence the mind, encouraging it to match the pace of its surroundings. Another gentle insight is that distance creates room for acceptance. When things are far away, they don't press in. They don't demand resolution. This space allows emotions to settle naturally. Worry loses some of its intensity when it's not constantly reinforced by proximity. As scale replaces speed, the experience of travel becomes more meditative. Movement is present, but it's not the focus. Instead, awareness turns toward the vastness itself. The quiet presence of space becomes a kind of companion, steady and unchanging. Distance also offers a sense of continuity. Even as you move farther from familiar places, the universe remains consistent. The same physical principles apply everywhere. This consistency can feel comforting, suggesting that even in unfamiliar territory, there's a reliable structure supporting everything. As the mind adjusts to this broader view, thoughts naturally slow. There's less impulse to jump from one idea to the next. Instead, ideas unfold gradually, like stars appearing one by one in a darkening sky. This slower mental rhythm aligns beautifully with rest. The sheer scale of space gently reminds us that it's okay to let go of urgency, that not everything needs immediate attention, that some things are best understood slowly or not fully at all. This acceptance can be deeply relaxing, allowing the mind to rest without needing answers. As distance continues to stretch outward, perspective continues to widen. The universe doesn't feel overwhelming. It feels spacious, open, patient, and within that vastness, there's a quiet invitation to slow down even further, to let thoughts drift without effort, and to allow rest to come naturally as scale replaces speed and perspective gently settles in. As the journey through space continues, time begins to feel different. Not because clocks stop working, but because the way we experience time slowly changes. On Earth, time is something that presses forward. It's marked by schedules, routines, and expectations. Minutes are counted, hours are filled, days are divided into tasks. In space, especially during long journeys, time loosens its grip. It no longer feels like something to chase or manage. Instead, it becomes something you move through gently, at a pace that doesn't demand urgency. One calming fact about traveling through space is that time can stretch without feeling heavy. When there's no daily commute, no sunrise tied to a workday, and no constant reminder of what comes next, moments begin to open up. A single hour can feel spacious rather than short. This isn't because time slows down in a dramatic way, but because the mind is no longer measuring it against obligations. Without pressure, time becomes softer. Another gentle truth is that in space, days and nights lose their familiar meaning. In orbit, a spacecraft may experience multiple sunrises and sunsets in a single Earth day. But these cycles don't structure life the way they do on the ground. Instead of time being organized by light and darkness, it's organized by calm routines and internal rhythms. This shift can feel deeply relaxing. Without sharp transitions marking the day, the body learns to rest without needing external signals. Long-duration space travel also highlights how patience becomes more important than speed. Journeys are planned around alignment, timing, and gentle adjustments rather than rapid movement. Sometimes the most effective path involves waiting, allowing gravity and motion to work together over time. This reliance on patience reinforces a slower mindset. Progress doesn't come from rushing forward, but from trusting that movement will happen when conditions are right. As time passes differently, the sense of anticipation changes as well. On Earth, waiting often feels uncomfortable because time is closely tied to outcomes. In space, waiting is simply part of the experience. There's no sense of being behind schedule. Each phase of the journey unfolds as expected, and that predictability can be soothing. The mind relaxes when it knows there's no need to hurry. Another interesting aspect of time in space is how it affects memory. Without constant novelty or urgency, memories form differently. Days blend together in a gentle way. Instead of being marked by sharp events, time is remembered through subtle changes, small routines, quiet observations, gradual shifts. This creates a smooth mental landscape where the past doesn't feel fragmented. Everything connects softly, without abrupt edges. The idea that time behaves differently in space is often associated with complex physics, but there's also a simple human experience behind it. When the environment is stable and predictable, the mind stops bracing for change. Without frequent interruptions, thoughts have room to unfold slowly. This extended mental space can feel restorative, allowing the mind to wander without pressure. Another calming fact is that long journeys through space encourage a different relationship with the future. Instead of constantly planning ahead, attention stays closer to the present moment. There's comfort in knowing that the journey will take time and that nothing can speed it up unnecessarily. This acceptance of duration can reduce anxiety, replacing it with quiet confidence. As time stretches, the body also adapts. Sleep cycles adjust. Rest becomes less about fitting into a schedule and more about listening to internal cues. Without strict time markers, the body finds its own rhythm. This natural alignment between rest and wakefulness can feel deeply calming, especially for a mind used to external demands. The perception of time also changes when distance is involved. Knowing that messages and signals take time to travel reinforces patience. Communication is thoughtful rather than immediate. Responses are considered rather than reactive. This slower exchange can feel grounding, encouraging reflection instead of haste. Another gentle insight is that long-duration travel reveals how resilient the human mind can be when given space and time. Without constant stimulation, the mind doesn't become bored, it becomes spacious. Thoughts slow. Attention settles. There's less urgency to fill every moment. This spaciousness mirrors the physical environment, reinforcing a sense of harmony. Time behaving differently also changes how achievements are perceived. Progress isn't measured by daily milestones but by steady continuity. Simply maintaining course becomes an accomplishment. This redefinition of progress can feel liberating, removing the pressure to constantly produce or achieve. As the journey continues, the idea of time passing becomes less noticeable. Days don't rush by, but they don't drag either. They simply unfold. This balanced perception can feel deeply restful, as if time itself has found a comfortable pace. Another calming fact is that even though time feels different, it remains reliable. Systems operate on precise timing. Orbits are calculated carefully. Predictability remains intact. This combination of reliability and gentleness creates trust. The environment feels stable, allowing the mind to relax further. The longer the journey lasts, the more natural this new relationship with time becomes. What once felt unusual begins to feel normal. The absence of urgency becomes familiar. The mind learns that it's safe to slow down, that nothing important is being missed. Time and space also invites reflection without demand. With fewer distractions, thoughts can revisit memories, explore ideas, or simply drift. There's no requirement to reach conclusions. This open-ended mental state can be deeply calming, allowing rest to emerge naturally. Another soothing aspect is how long journeys emphasize continuity rather than endpoints. The focus shifts from where you're going to how you're moving. This emphasis on process over destination can be comforting, reminding us that being present is often enough. As patience becomes the dominant rhythm, stress gradually fades. The body and mind align with the slow pace of travel. Breathing steadies, muscles relax, thoughts lose their sharp edges. Time no longer feels like something slipping away, but something gently carrying you forward. This altered experience of time can also influence how we think about life back on Earth. The urgency that once felt unavoidable begins to seem optional. The idea that everything must happen quickly loses its hold. This perspective shift can linger, offering a calmer approach to everyday life. As the spacecraft continues its quiet path, time flows steadily, without pressure or demand. Moments pass gently, one after another, each with room to exist fully. In this environment, patience isn't something you practice. It's something that happens naturally, as time itself invites you to move at its pace rather than your own. Living inside a spacecraft for long periods of time feels less like staying in a machine and more like settling into a quietly moving home. Once the initial excitement fades, daily life becomes shaped by small routines and familiar rhythms. The spacecraft is always in motion, yet from the inside, that movement feels steady and reassuring, like being carried along by something dependable and calm. One of the most interesting facts about life inside a spacecraft is how quickly it begins to feel ordinary. The environment may be unusual, but the human mind adapts by creating patterns. Simple actions repeat each day: waking up, washing, eating, moving through the same narrow spaces. These repetitions are not boring. They are grounding. They give structure to time without rushing it, helping the mind settle into a comfortable flow. Because space is limited, every object has a designated place. Items are carefully stored, often secured so they don't drift away. This organization creates a sense of order that can feel calming. There's no clutter, no excess. Everything present has a purpose. Over time, this simplicity can feel refreshing, removing distractions and allowing attention to focus on the moment rather than on choices or possessions. Another gentle truth about living in a spacecraft is that routines become deeply soothing. Meals happen at regular times. Work is broken into manageable tasks. Rest is scheduled thoughtfully. This predictability reduces decision fatigue. The mind doesn't need to constantly plan or adjust. It knows what comes next, and that knowledge brings a sense of ease. Inside a moving home, the body also learns new rhythms. Without gravity, everyday actions change slightly, but they become second nature with time. Drinking water, preparing food, even sleeping take on a gentle learning curve. Once learned, these actions feel smooth and familiar. The novelty fades, replaced by quiet competence. Sleeping inside a spacecraft is another example of how routine supports rest. Instead of beds, there are sleeping compartments or soft restraints that hold the body in place. While this may sound unusual, many people find it surprisingly comfortable. Without pressure points, the body can relax fully. Sleep becomes less about position and more about letting go. Over time, the body adjusts and rest comes more easily. Another calming fact is that life inside a spacecraft emphasizes teamwork and shared rhythm. Everyone follows a similar schedule. Lights dim at the same time. Activities align. This shared pace creates a sense of connection without the need for constant interaction. There's comfort in knowing that others are moving through the same quiet routine, even if each person has their own space. The steady hum of onboard systems becomes part of the background, much like distant city sounds on Earth. These sounds are consistent and predictable, offering reassurance rather than distraction. They signal that the environment is stable, that systems are functioning as they should. Over time, this soft noise fades into the background, allowing the mind to relax. Living in a spacecraft also changes the relationship with personal space. Rooms are small, but space feels used thoughtfully. There's no wasted area, yet nothing feels crowded once routines are established. The mind adapts by focusing less on size and more on function. This shift can feel calming, reminding us that comfort isn't always tied to abundance. Another interesting aspect is how daily tasks take on a slower, more mindful quality. Without gravity, movements are deliberate. Actions are performed with care. This naturally encourages presence. Each task receives attention, not because it's difficult, but because it requires gentle intention. This mindful pace can be deeply soothing, helping the mind stay grounded. The concept of home also shifts in space. Home is no longer a fixed place on Earth, but the environment that surrounds you as you move. The spacecraft becomes a constant companion, carrying you quietly through darkness and light. This moving home offers stability even as everything outside changes. There's comfort in knowing that wherever you are, home is with you. Another calming fact is that living in a spacecraft simplifies life. There are fewer choices, fewer distractions, fewer demands. This simplicity can feel like a relief. The mind doesn't need to juggle as many thoughts. Instead, it can rest in the present, supported by routine and structure. Over time, the repetition of daily life becomes almost meditative. Tasks blend into one another smoothly. There's no sharp division between work and rest. Everything flows together gently. This continuous rhythm helps reduce stress, as there's no need to constantly switch modes or respond to unexpected demands. The moving home also fosters a deep sense of awareness. With fewer external distractions, small details become noticeable. The feel of air moving gently, the sound of a panel being secured, the quiet glow of instruments. These subtle cues anchor attention, helping the mind stay calm and focused. Another gentle truth is that living in space encourages patience. Things take time. Movements are slower. Communication may be delayed. This natural slowing reinforces a calm mindset. There's no expectation of instant results. Progress happens steadily, one small step at a time. As days pass, the spacecraft feels less like a vehicle and more like a familiar environment. Personal touches, photos, small items, routines add warmth. These details transform the space from something purely functional into something personal. This sense of belonging can be deeply comforting. The idea of a moving home also changes how one thinks about stability. Stability doesn't come from being still, but from consistency. Even while traveling at incredible speeds, life inside remains steady. This contrast can feel reassuring, reminding us that calm doesn't require stillness, it requires balance. Another calming aspect is how the outside environment becomes a backdrop rather than a focus. The vastness of space remains present, but it doesn't intrude. Inside, life continues quietly. This separation between inner calm and outer scale allows the mind to rest without feeling overwhelmed. Living inside a spacecraft also highlights how adaptable humans are to new rhythms. What once seemed unfamiliar becomes comfortable. The mind learns to trust the routine. This adaptability can be reassuring, showing that calm can be found even in unfamiliar settings. As the journey continues, the moving home supports both activity and rest equally. There's no pressure to always be alert. Downtime is valued. Rest is built into the rhythm. This balance helps maintain emotional well-being, allowing the mind to relax fully. The steady repetition of life inside a spacecraft gently dissolves the sense of urgency. Days unfold predictably. There's no rush to complete tasks quickly. Instead, there's an emphasis on doing things carefully and calmly. This approach can feel deeply grounding. Over time, living inside a moving home becomes less about the journey and more about the experience of being present. The mind no longer focuses on distance or destination. It rests in the routine, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of daily life. In this environment, the idea of home expands. Home is no longer defined by location, but by feeling. It's the sense of safety, routine, and calm that travels with you. This realization can be deeply soothing, offering a new perspective on what it means to feel settled. As the spacecraft continues its quiet path through space, life inside flows steadily. Routine, rhythm, and repetition create a gentle structure that supports rest and reflection. The moving home carries everything needed: shelter, stability, and a calm pace, allowing the mind to relax and the journey to continue without effort or urgency. At some quiet point in the journey, there comes a moment when Earth is no longer the center of everything you see. It doesn't vanish, and it doesn't suddenly feel distant in an emotional sense, but it changes in a way that's hard to put into words. Looking back at Earth from far away is not dramatic or overwhelming. It's gentle, almost tender. The planet appears calm, self-contained, and whole, floating quietly in the darkness without asking for attention. From a distance, Earth doesn't look busy. The constant motion of life, cars, cities, schedules, conflicts, disappears into something much simpler. What remains is a sphere of soft colors. Blues blend into whites. Browns and greens fade into subtle patterns. One of the most striking facts about seeing Earth from space is how peaceful it looks. There are no visible borders, no sharp divisions, no signs of urgency. Just a planet moving steadily along its path. As Earth grows smaller, the mind begins to adjust its sense of scale. What once felt enormous now fits comfortably within a single view. This change can be deeply grounding. Problems that once seemed heavy begin to feel lighter, not because they no longer matter, but because they're seen within a much larger context. Distance has a way of softening sharp edges, both visually and emotionally. Another gentle truth about looking back at Earth is how it reshapes the idea of home. Home is no longer defined by streets or buildings or familiar landmarks. Instead, it becomes the entire planet. Everything familiar, every memory, every place you've been, exists on that small, luminous sphere. This realization can bring a quiet sense of connection. It reminds us that despite differences, everything and everyone shares the same fragile space. From far away, Earth's atmosphere becomes visible as a thin, glowing layer hugging the planet. This delicate veil protects all life below. Seeing it from this perspective often creates a sense of appreciation rather than fear. It highlights how finely balanced life is and how gently the planet sustains it. This awareness doesn't demand action in the moment. It simply invites respect and calm attention. Another interesting fact is how slowly Earth appears to move when viewed from a distance. On the surface, life feels fast-paced and ever-changing. From space, rotation is smooth and unhurried. Clouds drift gradually. Oceans reflect light steadily. This slow, predictable motion can feel soothing, as if the planet itself is breathing at a steady rhythm. Looking back at Earth also changes how time is perceived. Days and nights still pass, but they no longer dictate routine. Instead of time pushing forward, It feels like it's gently unfolding. Watching the planet turn beneath you can make time feel continuous rather than segmented. This continuity can help the mind relax, releasing the need to constantly track or measure moments. As the distance increases, emotional responses often deepen rather than fade. Many people describe feeling a stronger sense of care and connection to Earth when seeing it from afar. This isn't an overwhelming emotion. It's quiet and steady, a gentle awareness that everything familiar exists together in one place, moving calmly through space. Another calming aspect of this perspective is how it dissolves the illusion of separation. From far away, there's no sense of one place being more important than another. Cities blend into landscapes. Oceans connect continents. The planet feels unified. This sense of unity can be comforting, especially when the mind is ready to rest. The farther you look back, the more Earth becomes a symbol rather than a location. It represents continuity, life, and balance. This symbolic view can be grounding. It shifts focus away from individual concerns and towards something broader and steadier. The mind begins to mirror this steadiness, settling into a calm awareness. Another gentle truth is that seeing Earth from afar encourages humility without discomfort. The realization of how small everything appears doesn't feel diminishing. Instead, it feels freeing. There's less pressure to control outcomes or carry the weight of every decision. The vastness surrounding the planet suggests that life continues smoothly, even without constant effort. As Earth recedes, it remains visible longer than you might expect. Even at great distances, the planet still reflects light, still stands out against the darkness. This persistence can feel reassuring. It suggests that connection doesn't vanish easily. Distance doesn't erase presence. It simply changes how it's experienced. The visual simplicity of Earth from space also affects the mind. Without details to focus on, attention broadens. The planet becomes an object of gentle observation rather than analysis. This shift reduces mental effort. There's no need to interpret or judge, just to notice. Another calming fact is that looking back at Earth often brings a sense of gratitude rather than longing. The planet feels complete, doing what it has always done. There's comfort in knowing that life continues there, steady and self-sustaining. This awareness can ease feelings of separation, replacing them with trust. As the journey continues, Earth eventually becomes one light among many. It doesn't disappear, but it blends into the larger pattern of the universe. This blending can feel peaceful. It suggests that Earth is part of something vast and ongoing, rather than isolated or alone. This perspective naturally leads to reflection. Thoughts turn inward, not with urgency, but with curiosity. Memories surface gently. Priorities shift subtly. The mind begins to let go of what feels unnecessary, holding on to what feels meaningful. This process happens quietly without effort. Another gentle insight is that seeing Earth from afar reinforces the idea that stability doesn't require closeness. Even when distant, the planet remains reliable. Its motion is predictable. Its presence is constant. This reliability can feel comforting, especially in a setting where everything else feels unfamiliar. The emotional grounding that comes from this view often lingers. Even as attention turns back to the journey ahead, the image of Earth remains in the background of the mind. It serves as a quiet anchor, reminding you of balance, continuity, and connection. As the spacecraft moves farther along its path, looking back becomes an act of reflection rather than observation. Earth no longer dominates the view, but it continues to influence the experience. The sense of belonging it inspires doesn't fade. It settles in gently, becoming part of the emotional landscape. Another calming aspect of this moment is how it encourages acceptance. Things are as they are. Earth moves. Space surrounds it. There's no need to change anything. This acceptance can be deeply relaxing, allowing the mind to release tension and rest in the present. From far away, Earth feels both small and immense at the same time. Small in size, yet immense in meaning. This balance can be soothing. It reminds us that significance isn't tied to scale. Something can be physically small and still hold everything that matters. As the view continues to widen, the mind adjusts once more. Thoughts slow. Emotions settle. The image of Earth becomes less about distance and more about perspective. A reminder that stepping back, even mentally, can bring clarity and calm. Looking back at Earth from far away is not a moment of loss or separation. It's a moment of quiet understanding, a gentle recognition of where we come from and how it fits into a larger whole. This understanding doesn't demand action or answers. It simply invites reflection, grounding the mind in a sense of continuity as the journey moves forward. As the journey continues, something subtle but profound begins to change. The familiar sense of up and down slowly fades away. At first, this can feel strange because on Earth, orientation is constant. Gravity always points in one direction. Floors support us. Ceilings stay above. Even when we close our eyes, the body knows which way is down. In space, that quiet certainty gently dissolves, and with it comes an unexpected sense of ease. Without gravity pulling in a single direction, the idea of up and down no longer applies. A spacecraft doesn't have a natural top or bottom. Walls, floors, and ceilings exist only by convention. This is one of the most calming facts about space travel. Direction is no longer imposed. Instead of the environment telling the body how to orient itself, the body is free to choose comfort over alignment. At first, the mind may try to hold onto familiar reference points. It looks for a floor, a horizon, something to ground itself. But over time, those habits soften. The body learns that it doesn't need to orient in a specific way to feel safe. This realization can be deeply relaxing. Without the need to constantly correct posture or balance, tension begins to release. Another gentle truth is that navigating without up or down simplifies movement. On Earth, every action must work against gravity in some way. Standing requires effort. Sitting requires adjustment. In space, movement is guided by intention rather than force. A gentle push sends you drifting. A light touch stops motion. There's no preferred direction, so movement becomes fluid and unforced. This freedom from orientation also affects how the mind experiences control. On Earth, maintaining balance and direction requires constant, unconscious effort. The brain is always making small corrections. In space, that background work disappears. The mind no longer needs to manage orientation. This reduction in cognitive effort creates a sense of calm, as if a layer of responsibility has been quietly removed. Another calming fact is that without up or down, the body can rest in any position. There's no wrong way to relax. Whether facing one direction or another, the body feels equally supported. This freedom allows muscles to fully let go. There's no need to align with furniture or surfaces. Comfort becomes a matter of preference rather than necessity. As orientation fades, the concept of control changes as well. On Earth, control often means maintaining stability and resisting imbalance. In space, control means gentle guidance. Instead of bracing or correcting, you simply adjust softly. This shift can feel empowering in a quiet way. It encourages trust in the environment rather than constant vigilance. Another interesting aspect is how the loss of orientation affects perception. Without a fixed frame of reference, the mind becomes more flexible. Visual cues are interpreted more openly. The brain stops insisting on a single correct perspective. This flexibility can feel freeing, allowing thoughts to move more fluidly and creatively. Navigating without up or down also encourages a different relationship with effort. There's no need to push hard or move quickly. Everything responds to the smallest input. This responsiveness reinforces calm. The body learns that less effort produces more effect. This lesson can extend beyond space, subtly influencing how the mind approaches challenges. The disappearance of orientation can also feel meditative. With no dominant direction, awareness spreads evenly. Attention isn't pulled downward or forward. It floats. This even distribution of attention can reduce mental tension, making it easier to stay present without strain. Another gentle truth is that letting go of direction can reduce anxiety. On Earth, losing orientation often signals danger. In space, it's normal. The environment supports movement in all directions equally. Once the mind accepts this, the absence of up and down no longer feels disorienting. It feels neutral, even comforting. As the body adapts, movements become slower and more graceful. There's no rush to orient correctly before acting. You simply move, guided by intention rather than alignment. This ease can feel deeply soothing, especially for a mind accustomed to constant correction. The lack of orientation also changes how space itself feels. Instead of being something you move through in a straight line, space becomes something you exist within. There's no beginning or end to direction. This sense of being surrounded rather than guided can feel peaceful, like floating in a gentle current. Another calming fact is that navigation systems in space rely on reference points outside the body rather than internal balance. Instruments, stars, and visual markers guide movement. This means the body doesn't need to stay alert to orientation. It can relax, trusting external systems to handle direction. This delegation of responsibility can feel reassuring. Over time, the mind begins to appreciate the absence of hierarchy in direction. No place feels more important than another. There's no top to reach or bottom to avoid. This equality of space can feel emotionally balancing, reducing the urge to strive or compete. Navigating without up or down also invites a subtle philosophical shift. It suggests that many of the frameworks we rely on are situational rather than absolute. This realization doesn't create uncertainty. It creates openness. The mind becomes more willing to release rigid structures and settle into flexibility. Another gentle aspect is how this freedom encourages playfulness. Without gravity or orientation, movement can feel light and exploratory. A slow spin, a gentle drift, these actions don't serve a purpose beyond experience. This playful quality can be deeply relaxing, reminding the mind that not every action needs a goal. As the journey continues, the absence of up and down becomes unremarkable. What once felt unusual becomes normal. The mind stops noticing the lack of orientation because it no longer matters. This acceptance is calming in itself. It shows how easily the mind can adapt when it feels safe. The loss of orientation also highlights how much effort we expend on Earth simply to stay upright. In space, that effort disappears, revealing how much tension was tied to gravity. This realization can be liberating, encouraging the body to release tension it didn't know it was holding. Another calming truth is that navigating without direction fosters trust. You trust the environment to support you. You trust your movements to unfold smoothly. This trust reduces the need for constant control, allowing the mind to rest more fully. As orientation fades, so does the need to monitor position constantly. Awareness becomes broader and softer. Instead of focusing on alignment, the mind focuses on sensation and experience. This shift can feel deeply restorative, creating space for rest and reflection. The absence of up and down also changes how the body experiences stillness. On Earth, stillness often involves resisting gravity. In space, stillness is effortless. You simply stop moving and you remain where you are. This effortless stillness can feel profoundly calming. Another gentle insight is that letting go of direction mirrors letting go of expectations. Without a fixed orientation, there's no correct way to be positioned. This openness can extend to thoughts and emotions, allowing them to arise and fade without judgment. As the spacecraft continues its quiet path, navigating without up or down becomes second nature. The body floats, the mind drifts, control softens into guidance. Effort gives way to ease. In this environment, direction is no longer something to manage. It's something to release, allowing calm to settle in naturally as the journey continues. As the journey continues, light and darkness begin to take on new meanings. In space, they are no longer tied to familiar cycles of morning and night. There is no sunrise to signal a busy day, and no sunset to mark an ending. Instead, light and shadow drift past gently, creating a slow rhythm that feels unhurried and calm. One of the most soothing facts about traveling through space is that light is constant, yet ever-changing. The sun shines steadily, but whether you see it depends entirely on where you are and how you are moving. A spacecraft can pass from bright sunlight into deep darkness in moments, not because the day has ended, but because it has gently slipped behind a planet, a moon, or even its own orbit. This shifting light creates a quiet sense of flow, rather than a strict schedule. Darkness in space is not the same as darkness on Earth. Here, darkness often carries silence and stillness, but in space, it feels expansive rather than empty. When sunlight fades, stars become more visible. Faint glows emerge where darkness once seemed complete. This means that even in shadow, there is always something softly shining. The mind begins to associate darkness not with absence, but with gentle presence. Another calming truth is that space has no fixed night. Darkness doesn't arrive because time has passed. It arrives because position has changed. This subtle difference can be relaxing. It removes the pressure of time-based expectations. There's no need to be awake or asleep at a certain hour. Light and darkness simply exist, and you move through them naturally. Traveling through sunlight in space can feel quiet and steady rather than bright or harsh. Without an atmosphere to scatter light, the sun's presence is clear and direct. Shadows are sharp, but they don't feel heavy. The contrast between light and dark is clean and simple, allowing the mind to rest without processing complexity. Another interesting fact is that in orbit, you can experience many cycles of light and darkness in a single day. But because these transitions are smooth and predictable, they don't disrupt rest. Instead of signaling urgency, they feel like gentle waves. The mind learns to detach from Earth-based rhythms and settle into a slower internal pace. Light in space also behaves differently because it travels uninterrupted. On Earth, light bounces, bends, and scatters through air. In space, it moves cleanly and directly. This clarity can feel soothing. There's a sense of simplicity in knowing that what you see is what exists, without layers of distortion. Darkness, too, has a calming quality in space. It isn't heavy or enclosing. It stretches outward endlessly. This vast darkness can feel comforting, like a wide, quiet room where thoughts can slow and spread out without resistance. Another gentle truth is that the human body adapts quickly to these changing light conditions. Without strong cues to stay alert or active, the body follows its own rhythms. Rest becomes more intuitive. Sleep arrives naturally, guided by comfort rather than clocks. Traveling through alternating light and shadow also changes how the mind experiences contrast. Brightness feels softer when it's not constant. Darkness feels lighter when it's not absolute. This balance creates a calming visual experience that doesn't overstimulate or exhaust the senses. Another soothing fact is that space darkness allows distant objects to stand out more clearly. Galaxies, nebulae, and stars reveal themselves most fully when there's no competing light. This means that darkness enhances beauty rather than hiding it. The mind learns to appreciate stillness as a space where quiet wonders appear. As light fades and returns, there's no sense of loss or arrival. Each transition is simply part of motion. This continuity can be deeply relaxing. It removes the emotional weight often attached to beginnings and endings. The absence of a traditional night also affects how thoughts settle. Without the idea that it's time to stop, the mind doesn't resist rest. Instead, it eases into it. Relaxation becomes an option rather than a requirement. Another calming aspect is how darkness in space feels safe. There are no unseen corners or sudden changes. Everything moves slowly and predictably. The mind doesn't need to stay alert for surprises. It can soften its focus and let awareness drift. Light, when it appears, does so gradually. Reflections grow. Edges become defined. There's no rush. This gentle return of brightness can feel reassuring, like a quiet reminder that the environment remains steady and reliable. Traveling through these changing light conditions also encourages acceptance. You don't control when light arrives or fades. You simply move with it. This lack of control doesn't feel unsettling. It feels freeing. There's nothing to manage, nothing to fix. Another gentle truth is that the mind begins to associate darkness with rest rather than sleep alone. Darkness becomes a space for slowing down, not shutting off completely. This distinction allows for deeper relaxation without pressure. As the spacecraft continues its path, light and shadow blend into a continuous experience. The mind stops labeling them as separate states. They become part of the same gentle journey. Awareness remains steady even as surroundings change. This fluid experience of light and darkness mirrors the way thoughts can move when the mind is relaxed. Ideas arise and fade without urgency. Nothing demands attention. Everything is allowed to pass at its own pace. The changing light also affects how time feels. Without a clear day-night cycle, time becomes less segmented. Moments stretch. The mind drifts more freely, unbound by schedules or expectations. Another calming insight is that traveling through darkness and light reminds us that rest doesn't depend on conditions being perfect. Even as surroundings shift, calm remains possible. This realization can feel deeply reassuring. As light softens and darkness returns, the body naturally releases tension. Muscles relax. Breathing slows. The environment feels supportive rather than stimulating. There's no need to stay alert or engaged. The gentle rhythm of light and shadow continues, unhurried and predictable. Nothing sudden happens. Nothing demands reaction. The mind settles deeper into rest, guided by the steady movement of the journey rather than external cues. In this space, light and darkness are not opposites. They are companions flowing together. One reveals, the other quiets. Both contribute to a sense of balance and calm. As the journey moves forward, these shifting conditions become part of the background. The mind no longer notices each change. It simply rests within the experience, allowing light and darkness to pass without effort or concern. This quiet drifting through brightness and shadow prepares the mind for deeper rest. There's no urgency to interpret or respond. Everything unfolds gently, offering a steady, calming presence as the journey continues onward. As the journey continues, the idea of arrival slowly begins to lose its importance. In space travel, not every mission is defined by a clear destination or a precise moment of completion. Some journeys are designed simply to move, to observe, to exist within motion itself. This concept can feel surprisingly calming, especially for a mind that's used to measuring progress by milestones and endpoints. One of the quiet truths about space exploration is that many spacecraft are sent out without a final stopping place in mind. They travel outward, gathering information, adjusting their paths, and continuing onward long after their original goals have been met. This open-ended movement isn't a flaw in the mission. It's part of its design. The journey itself becomes the purpose. This idea gently challenges the way we often think about travel. On Earth, movement usually implies arrival. We go somewhere to reach a specific place. In space, movement can exist for its own sake. A spacecraft can drift for years, even decades, following a path shaped by gravity and momentum rather than schedules or deadlines. This slow, ongoing motion can feel deeply reassuring, as if there's no pressure to finish or conclude. Another calming fact is that these long journeys unfold at a pace that feels almost timeless. Distances are so vast that even moving at incredible speeds, progress is gradual. This slowness isn't frustrating. It's expected. The absence of urgency allows systems to operate steadily and predictably, reinforcing a sense of patience built into the journey itself. When there's no clear endpoint, attention naturally shifts to the present moment. Instead of focusing on what comes next, awareness settles into what's happening now. Instruments collect data. Stars pass by slowly. Signals travel quietly back toward Earth. This focus on the ongoing process can be deeply relaxing, encouraging the mind to let go of anticipation. Another gentle truth is that journeys without clear endpoints often lead to unexpected discoveries. Because they aren't rushing toward a specific goal, they remain open to whatever comes along the way. This openness doesn't create uncertainty. It creates curiosity. The journey becomes flexible, adapting smoothly to new information rather than forcing outcomes. The idea that movement itself can be enough also reshapes how time is experienced. Without a countdown to arrival, time stretches out. Days don't feel like steps toward an end. They feel like individual moments, each complete on its own. This way of experiencing time can feel soothing, especially for a mind that's ready to rest. Another calming aspect is how these journeys rely on consistency rather than speed. Systems are designed to function quietly over long periods. There's no need for constant adjustment or correction. This stability creates an environment where everything unfolds gently, reinforcing a sense of trust in the process. Journeys without endpoints also encourage acceptance. There's no pressure to control the outcome or predict every step. The path is allowed to evolve naturally. This acceptance can feel liberating, reducing the mental effort required to stay engaged or alert. Another interesting fact is that some spacecraft continue traveling long after contact with Earth fades. Even when communication ends, the journey doesn't stop. The craft continues moving, carrying its quiet presence through space. This idea can feel comforting, suggesting that motion and purpose don't require constant observation. The absence of an endpoint also softens the idea of success or completion. There's no final moment that defines whether the journey was worthwhile. Instead, value is found in the experience itself. This perspective can ease the mind, removing the need to evaluate or judge progress. As the journey continues, the environment remains steady. Stars shift slowly. Light changes gently. Nothing signals an ending. This continuity creates a calm rhythm, allowing the mind to settle into the idea that movement doesn't need to lead anywhere specific to be meaningful. Another calming truth is that these journeys often operate far beyond human timescales. They aren't bound to lifetimes or generations. This long view can feel grounding, reminding us that motion and change can unfold peacefully over immense spans of time. When there's no clear endpoint, the mind can relax its grip on expectations. There's no need to prepare for arrival or anticipate what comes next. This release of expectation can create a deep sense of ease, allowing thoughts to slow and drift naturally. Another gentle aspect is how open-ended journeys mirror natural processes. Rivers flow without aiming for a destination. Seasons change without rushing toward an end. Space travel without an endpoint aligns with this same quiet logic. Movement happens because it can, not because it must conclude. As the spacecraft continues its path, the idea of distance loses its weight. Whether far from Earth or closer to a star, the journey remains consistent. This consistency can feel reassuring, offering a stable background for rest and reflection. Another calming insight is that journeys without endpoints remove the fear of being behind. There's no schedule to miss, no deadline to fail. Everything unfolds as it should, at its own pace. This freedom from comparison and urgency can be deeply soothing. The longer the journey continues, the more natural it feels. What once seemed unusual becomes familiar. The mind adapts to the idea that motion doesn't need to resolve into arrival. It can simply continue quietly and steadily. This way of traveling also encourages presence. Without an endpoint to focus on, attention rests in the ongoing experience. Sounds, sights, and sensations are noticed without the pressure of moving on. This presence can feel meditative, supporting deep relaxation. Another gentle truth is that open-ended journeys foster resilience. Without a fixed goal, the journey can adapt to changes without stress. Adjustments are made smoothly, without the sense that something has gone wrong. This adaptability reinforces calm. As time passes, the idea of arrival fades almost completely. What remains is a steady sense of motion, supported by predictable systems and gentle rhythms. The mind begins to mirror this steadiness, letting go of the need to reach a conclusion. Journeys with no clear endpoint also invite reflection. They create space for thoughts to wander without direction, much like the journey itself. This wandering isn't aimless. It's restorative, allowing ideas to surface and fade naturally. Another calming aspect is how these journeys emphasize trust. Trust in physics. Trust in design. Trust in the path unfolding as it should. This trust reduces mental effort, making it easier to relax into the experience. As the spacecraft continues onward, there's no sense of being unfinished. Each moment feels complete. Movement itself becomes enough. This realization can feel deeply comforting, especially as the mind prepares to rest more fully. The journey doesn't announce where it's going next. It doesn't promise an ending. It simply continues, steady and quiet, offering a sense of peace in motion itself as the path carries on gently through space. As the journey continues, something gentle becomes clear. Even though you are still moving, still traveling through space, rest has already arrived. Motion no longer feels like effort. It feels like being carried. The sense of traveling fades into the background, replaced by a quiet awareness that you don't need to stop in order to feel still. In space, rest doesn't require stillness. A spacecraft can be moving thousands of miles an hour and still feel calm inside. This is one of the most comforting truths of space travel. Motion and rest are not opposites here. They exist together, quietly and naturally. The body can relax fully even while drifting forward, supported by momentum rather than force. This idea gently challenges what we're used to on Earth. We often think rest only happens when everything stops, when the day ends, when movement pauses. But in space, rest is woven into motion itself. Once the body is no longer working against gravity or resistance, movement becomes effortless. There's nothing to push, nothing to hold up, nothing to brace against. The body simply floats, supported on all sides. As this realization settles in, the muscles begin to soften even more. There's no reason to stay alert or engaged. The environment isn't demanding anything. Systems hum quietly. Lights remain steady. Motion continues smoothly without sudden changes. This predictability creates a sense of safety that allows deeper relaxation. Another gentle truth is that the mind adapts quickly to this kind of rest. Thoughts slow without being forced. There's no pressure to fall asleep or stay awake. Both states feel equally welcome. Awareness drifts, much like the spacecraft itself, moving without urgency from one moment to the next. In this state, the mind doesn't need to track where you are or how fast you're moving. Those details lose importance. What matters is how it feels to be here, now, supported by a steady rhythm that doesn't change. This steady rhythm can be deeply soothing, offering a sense of continuity that invites rest. Resting while still in motion also brings a subtle emotional comfort. There's reassurance in knowing that nothing needs to be done. The journey doesn't require input. It doesn't need direction or correction. It simply continues, guided by forces that are constant and reliable. As the mind settles into this understanding, worries begin to feel distant. Concerns that once felt urgent lose their sharpness. They don't disappear, but they soften. Distance, both physical and mental, has a way of creating perspective. Problems feel smaller when viewed within a larger, calmer context. Another calming aspect of resting in motion is how it mirrors natural experiences we already trust. Being rocked gently on water, riding in a quiet train, floating in a pool. In all these moments, Movement helps the body relax rather than keeping it alert. Space travel carries this same quality, but in a more constant, uninterrupted way. The absence of sudden changes allows the nervous system to settle completely. There's no need to anticipate anything. Nothing unexpected happens. The environment remains stable, predictable, and quiet. This consistency signals safety, encouraging the body to release any remaining tension. As time passes, awareness becomes softer. You may notice your breathing slowing without effort. Each breath feels natural, unforced. There's no need to control it. The body knows how to rest on its own when given the chance. Another gentle truth is that rest in space doesn't depend on posture. There's no correct position for relaxation. The body can float in whatever orientation feels comfortable. This freedom removes another layer of effort, allowing relaxation to deepen naturally. The mind also begins to release the need to label experiences. There's no need to think, "I am resting now," or "I am still awake." Those distinctions become less important. What matters is the feeling of ease that fills the space between thoughts. As motion continues quietly, it becomes almost imperceptible. The sensation of traveling fades into a background hum, like a distant current. The mind no longer focuses on where you're going. It rests in the experience of being carried. This kind of rest can feel different from sleep, yet just as restorative. It's a state where awareness can drift without effort. Thoughts come and go slowly, like stars passing through the field of view. There's no need to hold on to them or push them away. Another comforting aspect is knowing that even if sleep arrives, the journey continues safely. Nothing depends on your attention. Systems are designed to operate quietly and reliably. This allows the mind to fully let go, trusting that everything will unfold as it should. As you rest in motion, time becomes less noticeable. Minutes stretch gently. Moments blend together. The mind stops counting and measuring. This timelessness can feel deeply peaceful, creating space for true rest. The idea that rest doesn't require stopping can be surprisingly freeing. It suggests that even in life, calm can exist alongside movement. You don't need to pause everything to feel at ease. Sometimes, the most restorative rest happens when you allow yourself to be carried by steady motion. As the journey continues, this understanding settles quietly into awareness. There's no announcement, no clear transition. Rest simply becomes the natural state. You may notice that thoughts feel lighter now, less urgent. They drift by without pulling you along. Attention softens, no longer clinging to any one idea. This gentle drifting is exactly where rest lives. Another calming truth is that being in motion without effort builds trust. Trust in the environment. Trust in the journey. Trust that you don't need to manage or control what's happening. This trust allows deeper relaxation than effort ever could. As space stretches on around you, it no longer feels vast or overwhelming. It feels open and supportive, a quiet expanse where nothing presses in and nothing demands action. The journey inward becomes more important than the journey outward. Awareness turns gently toward comfort, breath, and the feeling of being supported. External movement fades into the background, while internal calm takes center stage. At this point, there's no need to stay focused. If sleep arrives, it arrives naturally. If wakefulness remains, it does so peacefully. Both are welcome. There's no wrong way to experience this moment. The spacecraft continues its steady path. Stars pass quietly. Light and shadow drift by. Everything moves, yet nothing disturbs the calm that has settled in. You don't need to remember anything. You don't need to anticipate what comes next. The journey doesn't require participation. It simply continues, offering a safe and gentle space for rest. If you find yourself drifting towards sleep, allow it. If you remain awake, that's perfectly fine too. The experience is the same. Calm, steady, and unhurried. As this quiet motion carries on, you may feel a sense of gratitude for the stillness it provides. Not a dramatic emotion, just a gentle appreciation for a moment where nothing is required of you. The universe continues moving. The journey continues unfolding. And within that motion, rest remains available, constant, and quiet. If you've enjoyed drifting through this journey, you're always welcome to return for another gentle exploration. For now, simply remain here, resting while still in motion, letting the calm carry you wherever it needs to go.